This is July 26th, 2019. Pam Dougherty interviewing her father, Patrick Dougherty, in Columbia, Missouri. So I guess my first question would be, what made you get interested in civil rights in the first place?
For a period of time, I went to meetings, and some of those meetings were religious leaders and civil rights leaders. And feeling that as a white person, I could do more, that white people should not be reluctant to get involved, leadership-wise, etc., that this is a country that has all kinds of people, and it's a country open to everybody, hopefully, and as such, nobody has a complete claim to what's going on. Everybody should be interested in not only civil rights, but the leadership as such. And also, I enjoyed reading about the protest of Percy Green, because his protests were, in many cases, very effective, I think, and very creative protests.
So, for instance, scaling the arch in St. Louis?
Yeah, and they had to go up and haul him down, and then he was part of the whole civil rights movement. And when a plane came down and flew between the arches of the arch and went through the arch itself, Percy Green claimed that this was one of his tactics. He knew there wouldn't be a big argument about that, because to fly between the arches was a criminal offense, and so nobody's going to go out and dispute Percy Green's claim that this was one of his tactics, because to do so might put them in jail.
And he partly did this protest because there were no black people or people of color that were hired for the construction of the arch?
Yes, and I supported those kinds of claims and so forth in some cases, but I took it up on my own. What I did was decide to write a letter helping to expose the fact that the University of Missouri was going to St. Louis during the Veiled Prophet Parade to help celebrate the all-white nature.
And this was the Mizzou marching band?
Well, in the broad analysis, there was the Veiled Prophet Ball and Parade. Veiled Prophet made the claims that they were the founding fathers, and they made all these claims of Veiled Prophet leadership, and the Veiled Prophet motive was this was a leadership situation. Back in the 1870s, there was a nationwide railroad strike. The railroad strike turned out to be the first and only general strike in human history. There was a lot of talk about the strikes and the general strikes. There were all kinds of readings, there were all kinds of books, people theorizing about a general strike. But a general strike had never really happened. A general strike was just talked about. And suddenly, the railroad strike turned into a general strike. People started walking off of their jobs and striking for hope and so forth. People don't realize how important that was. And then, suddenly, what threw turmoil into the whole process was that suddenly this general strike developed black leadership, which frightened the powers that be. It threw the country into turmoil, because not only did you have a general strike, which was almost unheard of, but you had suddenly black leadership develop. And white people started accepting black leadership for leading them into this general strike. And they cooperated with the black leadership. But what this did, this suddenly created the Veiled Prophet order and so forth. And one of the books on the Veiled Prophet puts forth that Veiled Prophet was the direct descendant of the Ku Klux Klan, with their hoods and their secrecy. So right away, what you had developed was the Veiled Prophet Ball and the Veiled Prophet Parade. And right away, the Veiled Prophet Parade gave the Veiled Prophet the opportunity to create very insulting and demeaning images for their parade on their floats. Not only did you have the development of the parade to put forth these insulting and demeaning situations, you also, almost from the beginning, had blacks and people who were subjects of these demeaning and insulting parade figures, but you had almost at the same time protest against that kind of tactic. And so there was violence in some cases associated with people who felt these insults, who were victims of these insulting figures in the parade. The parade became very insulting throughout the years, and the Veiled Prophet enjoyed great police protection. There was widespread protest up to the time and through the time that Percy Green started his protest.
And did you hear about the Veiled Prophet? When did you first hear about it? Was it when you started working at Mizzou?
We had meetings, and this one meeting was a newspaper item that said that the Marching Mizzou Band would be celebrating at the Veiled Prophet Parade. And so that started my action. I wrote a letter to the public in general, I guess you could say.
To the university?
Yeah, it was protesting the presence of the band at the Veiled Prophet Parade. I guess you might interpret some of it that involved my whole feelings towards the parade, and I think I overstepped my protest in the sense that the political science department and the students that I taught, they should have been given notice. It wasn't that I was wrong, but I was wrong to write this letter and all the things that went into it without any kind of advance notice, the political science department or the student. I immediately apologized because I could see their point. The letter of apology was strictly to my class members and to the political science department that I did not give them. They felt I should have given them notice.
When you say your protest, what was your protest? What did you do?
Well, basically a letter.
You wrote the letter, but then you went to the parade.
Yes. When the parade started, I laid down in front of the parade. But as you know, the bands are far apart. So in reality, I didn't stop anything as far as the band playing on the streets, and I got arrested for laying down allegedly in front of the parade. But the parade was not held up because the band members were so far apart.
Did people know why you were laying down?
Yes, that was in the letter that I wrote previously. So the police came, put me under arrest, and I went to jail in St. Louis. And it was a rather remarkable time because I heard later that all the black students in the parade did not participate. I mean, all the black students who were in the MU band were part of the Marching Mizzou. They refused to participate in the parade. So they were absent. I found this out later. And from all that could be stated, this was in support of me and my protest. Now, this is what I had heard. I can't verify this, but that there was no black students involved in the march.
Had you known Percy Green at this time? Or did you meet him after this occurred?
The answer was yes, that they knew that I was going to do this. They were aware of the letter, but they were not, at that time, I was not a part of their situation, although I was promoting the same cause.
So then what happened after you got arrested?
Well, I had the education to some extent of being in jail with two other individuals one of which it was a black gentleman who was in jail for some particular reason, and I can't remember what that reason was. The other gentleman, a black gentleman who was in the same jail cell as me and the other gentleman. We were all in this jail to begin with in St. Louis. And the one who was very angry was a person who had just returned from Vietnam and was arrested because he fit the description, the physical description of another black person in St. Louis. And because he fit the description that he had committed a crime, they arrested him. And a review of his case was not going to take place until 2 or 3 days after that. And what made him so angry is that he was in Vietnam when this criminal event took place. And he tried to explain this to the powers that be, the policemen who were arresting him. And he made the claim to the policeman that he was in Vietnam during this and he could not possibly have committed this crime. And they acknowledged this, but they didn't let him out or anything. They said he would have to go before the judge beginning of the next week to be released from jail. And my friends and wife came down and bailed me out of jail. The other 2 gentlemen were still in jail when I got out. I feel like that was the beginning of a process where I could join those who had protested the Veiled Prophet in the earliest times, and that I accomplished something for bringing this to people's attention. It got in the newspapers and so forth, and the reaction of the other gentleman in jail, his reaction when he heard of what I was doing, he was flabbergasted. He was so happy, or disbelief. He couldn't believe there I was in my suit and tie, and I was arrested for protesting the Veiled Prophet. I guess he'd never seen a white person doing this before. He was astonished that I was sitting there in jail and had done what I moved to. So, with all that said, I went into legal problems and situations at the University of Missouri.
So you were a lecturer?
Yes, but I was suspended because of the letter I wrote. And they claimed that I had violated certain principles that were part of my agreement originally with the University of Missouri and the Political Science Department. And that started a long legal process, which I was allowed to continue as a teacher, but not under the same rules and regulations that I started with. So I ended up on a part-time basis with a couple of professors who were supportive of me and let me participate on a very informal basis with their classes. This was very informal. The university knew what was going on. They didn't protest it, so I was able to have somewhat of an informal teaching situation.
And this was during the time that they were having the hearings?
It was during the time that I was still under suspension. The gentleman who took my place allowed me to continue teaching on a very informal basis.
And when did they finally fire you?
According to the University of Missouri, the firing took place almost immediately. Suspension. And even though I participated on an informal basis, which involved giving out grades, what happened at the end of all this, I did get my full pay. Because of court action, this was all part of the appellate court. Not the district court, but the appellate court. What the final situation was is I was given what pay I deserved. So I was satisfied with that. What it amounted to is I felt that I made a difference to the extent that it helped some people understand more what the Veiled Prophet was involved in. That parades can be very political, and this was, for example, in Ireland, you had parades that resulted in bombings and deaths in Ireland. Thank God that did not deteriorate into violence. But there was strong support, I think, for me in the long run, and there was more notoriety came forth. And then there was a second time that I was jailed for misbehavior, and this time at the Veil Prophet Ball. And at the Veil Prophet Ball, I was...
And this was like 4 or 5 years later?
Yeah. I was able to get inside the Veil Prophet Ball by a woman who was the daughter of one of the Veil Prophet members. And she provided me with this huge banner that I was to use. Basically, what the banner proclaimed was that the Veil Prophet was a racist entity. So, what her instructions were, after the women were all introduced, who were wives of the Veil Prophet, I was to go down and get up on the stage and unleash the banner that proclaimed the Veil Prophet was racist, which it was. I couldn't wait because of the tension. I'd never done anything like this before. And I decided that I had to go down, that I couldn't wait. So I caught everybody off, went up while the women were still being introduced.
Dang, okay.
And now some people were critical, I guess, of the fact that there were certain things that maybe I should have considered, and that was that you could have waited until after the women were, and I didn't. All I can say is I didn't wait. And I did that, and people who I think maybe, including Percy Green, had chosen the time for a particular purpose, but I just went ahead. What happened then was I was arrested again. I was in a considerable pain in the process because they carried me across the stage and they kept trying to push my body down on those electric lights that lighted the stage. The security were going to press my body down on these electric light bulbs that it could cut into my leg. And so I was doing my best to keep my body away from those light bulbs. And I was thankfully spared any cuts or bruises as far as that was concerned. But then when they got me back, they had some pretty painful events, and I guess they did this on purpose. It was so painful that I couldn't really take it much anymore. I didn't hesitate from yelling from the pain.
Was this, they were twisting your arms or your legs, or what were they doing?
All of the above.
Well, I know you came home with a black eye one of those times.
Yeah, and that was just part of the event, as far as I'm concerned. And I did my part. I gave some pretty good yells out. And the women's event was still going on, but it did with my loud, I was back. Nobody could see me, but they could hear me. The people out there.
Because they dragged you back behind the stage.
I was behind the stage.
Getting beat up.
Getting beat up. It was painful to some extent. And I let it be known that I was in pain back there. And I think some of the people who supported my protest felt like it was more disturbing that this happened with the wives. So the final event, I did some more research on the Veil Prophet later on, but when the university obeyed the directions of the court, the U.S. Court of Appeals, when they paid me what was due me, my active participation in the Veil Prophet ended, but over the next 2 or 3 years, it became more civilized. I haven't kept up with a lot of it, but they started hiring black individuals.
Or admitting them as members.
Yeah, admitting me. And those that were admitted, at least the first year, I think, were black physicians, doctors, medical physicians.
So how did you first meet Percy Green? Was this back when you were working at St. Louis University?
If I remember right, this was during a meeting where he was participating.
And he started the group Action in St. Louis?
Yeah. And I continued my protest, and he continued his protest. And I pretty much was on my own. But I felt like I accomplished something, and I think I accomplished something that was a current part through Percy Green of the civil rights movement, and I think I had a small part to play.
Was he part of orchestrating your participation in the ball for unfurling that banner?
I think he was probably in contact with the woman who got me in.
Okay.
I do know that he supported me. I felt like his protest and his activity was a big part of the civil rights movement in St. Louis.
I remember when we were kids in St. Louis, you always had us watching, like anytime Martin Luther King was on TV, any of his speeches, you wanted us to watch.
Yeah.
And I remember you specifically saying to us, this man is going to change the world. And I remember sometimes we'd be out with signs marching.
Yeah.
And what was that for?
Some of our family marches were part and parcel of just the civil rights movement in general. Later on, that involved support of Dr. Martin Luther King. And we had some local marches in that regard. And my kids were participants in some of these marches. I enjoyed, in some cases, the meetings that were going on that I attended. And I was happy, or at least satisfied, that I had done my small part, helping to bring about the demise of the Veiled Prophet order. I had a small part to play, and I was proud of it.